the group from Yale, led by Harlan Krimholz, Jan Liu, and Mitsuki Savano, who have been very kind to come and give us an information on decentralized clinical trial to this grand rounds. And to introduce Harlan and the panel is a big task, but I think I take this time to learn about people. And Harlan is one of the most influential person as the JACC editor-in-chief. At the moment, he's actually setting the trends in cardiology. But a brief background about him, he's the Harold H. Hines Professor of Medicine in Cardiology, Professor of Epidemiology and Public Health at Yale School of Medicine, founder and director for the Center of Outcomes Research and Evaluation Core, and editor-in-chief, as I mentioned. Harlan started from UCSF. He completed his internal medicine, cardiology, subsequently came as a faculty in 1997 in Yale, where he ascended to the throne of becoming full professor and getting all the accolades. In 1995, he founded and directed the Center for Outcomes Research. Subsequently, interestingly, I found a commonality. He also has been a co-director and director of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Clinical Scholar Program. So there's something similar to what we have in terms of the names that we carry. And also the co-director for the Yale Center for Research Computing. It's amazing to see his CV, where there are close to about 10 pages only on the committees that he has contributed his thought leadership on, which range from NIH, AHA, ACC, CMS, so on and so forth. It's just too many to mention. And also awards, many to mention.
I think that just means I've been on too many committees.
No, it means that you have been able to be an influential leader, Harlan, and well-liked. Most importantly, amongst his awards, Distinguished Scientific Award at AHA. But I also found that he has his influence in the Chinese Society of Cardiology. He was given the top 10 International Cardiology Award in 2018. Over 1,200 manuscripts, just incredible. Harlan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Partha.
Yes, I would like to then now introduce the two young executive associate editors at JACC, Yan Liu and Mitsuki Sawano. Yan Liu came from Fudan University in Shanghai, China, and subsequently came and had a training at Harvard School of Public Health in Boston. She subsequently transitioned as a postdoctoral associate in 2015 and is currently the assistant professor of medicine and biomedical informatics and data science. Again, extremely prolific career, over 160 publications in a short period of time. And the same has happened with Mitsuki Savano, who is associate research scientist at Yale School of Medicine, came from Keio University, and subsequently has tenure in Harvard Medical School as a clinical scholar program, and has over 96 publications in a very short period of time. I would be also very eager to introduce a panel paralleling our extraordinary group of speakers. We have our three panelists who are right from the heart of the community. Rachna Kulkarni, who's the regional director for the cardiovascular services, director for Women's Heart Center in RWJ Barnabas Health. Kusum Punjabi, associate professor in Department of Emergency Medicine. Ranjita Sengupta, who's attending cardiologist, RWJ, UH, Somerset, and New Brunswick. And all three of them are extremely reached out in the heart of community, in the South Asian community specifically. Particularly, this is relevant because we're going to talk about decentralized clinical trials. One of them is going to be about how do we recruit South Asian population in one of the clinical trials. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my slides and pass it over to Harlan for your team to take on our grand rounds.
Well, thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here. What a terrific institution. Partha, of course, I followed your career for such a long time, and you're just a unique talent. You care so much about the people around you. You're one of those leaders who really invest in others and are so humble yourself. So, you know, it's a pleasure to be here. It's also, I've heard so many good things about this entire system, Rutgers, the work that's being done in New Jersey. We're eager to find ways to work together. And as you know, and just to share with the others, we've been talking about, are there ways to develop partnerships to be able to align, to find ways to make a positive impact? We both share the view that research is intended to make people's lives better, to promote health. It's not about these papers but the science is what's important, that we can follow the science and ultimately see its translation to actually help improve people's lives. And, we're firmly committed to that. And so I think there's a lot of commonality of values between us and what's going down at your place. And I know what's in your heart as well. So let's get started. This is a Grand Rounds, little different. It's not about focusing on a particular topic in cardiology, but it's trying to take a step back and take a look about how we generate knowledge, and can we do a better job? And what would it mean to do research that honors and respects the participants in a way that far exceeds what we have traditionally done, what I was sort of trained in, where we start thinking from the beginning about, how do we create these alignments? How do we work together in sort of common cause? And what can we do to create better ways and faster ways and more efficient ways of producing the knowledge that patients need? And so that's really what this is about. We're going to show some examples and lay this out to you, and maybe hope to engage you in sort of some of these new ways of doing things. So next slide. I think we just have some disclosures. Well, first the agenda, but this is us. Keep going. You can just keep going. Disclosures, we'll pause here for a second. Well, let's go next. So this is a concept of decentralized trials, and it kind of emanates from the idea that we really should be meeting people where they live. For participants in studies, it can often be inconvenient to go to sites. It can be expensive if you have to go park, navigate transportation. It can be challenging in very many ways. And the idea is, if we want to be able to serve people in the best possible way that we can, let's think about what their lives are like. What can make it easier for them? And if we think about efficiency, the idea about sites can cause all sorts of problems. So, these traditional models, where we always go through sites, we work with various different institutions, we go through legal, we have contracts, very many different IRBs, can cause all sorts of challenges for us. So what are these barriers? Well, like I said, limited access. Many people in the United States, by the way, live at quite a distance from where a trial might be offered and don't have the possibility of participating, or they're ill, or they're limited with regard to their socioeconomic status, or what they're able to do with regard to their job, finding time. And so that can limit access. It can limit diversity, because disproportionately those people who aren't able to find time in the middle of the day, or can't find transportation, or are finding these challenges overwhelming because of the cost and other issues, are people who are traditionally underrepresented in the trials. And so, as we're thinking about how do we broaden that access, we have to recognize that low diversity is emblematic of our current system. High dropout rates, even when we are able to enroll people in the trials, when there's burden, when there are challenges, when there are issues, ultimately leads people who are well-intentioned when they join not to be able to continue to finish till the end. And that also causes issues. Slow recruitment, well, when there are these challenges, it can take a long time to really fill the trials. All of this leads to a challenge of being able to produce the research in timely ways. And then, all of this still is high cost, which means you really can't do very many of these studies, these large scale studies that are testing new treatments, because they cost so darn much. You've got to have a high level of conviction. You have to be convinced they're going to work. That means there can be many other things that you don't have quite as high a confidence in, but you can never really test fully, because it's just too much money to go through all of the study. So it means there's lots of stuff that stays on the shelf that ultimately could be tested. So what is this new idea about decentralized trials? Well, it's the idea that we can conduct trials outside of traditional clinical sites, that We may depend on sites to help us identify people to invite, but we don't have to have people come into busy clinical areas where, you know, they may be deprioritized and we're not able to provide them with experiences that ultimately make it easy for them, delight them. So we can conduct the trials outside of clinical sites. We can enable remote participation through approved digital technology so that we can use technology to make it easier. Let people participate from the convenience of their homes. Or if they do have to go places, let them go places where they can get easy access, a Quest or other places that close to their neighborhoods where they're not having to go through busy traditional academic sites, for example. It can enhance accessibility, compliance, and most importantly, this patient centricity in research. The idea that, again, we're going to honor and respect people's participation. We want to tell them what we're doing. We want to think in every aspect of how we design these studies. How are we best serving the people who are participating and making it a delightful experience? Next slide. So where we began, let me just to keep going. What we found was when we were coming up with new ideas about how to do these kinds of studies, we encountered a lot of inertia. This current system is set up and it is very sort of calcified in the way in which it's done. It's not very agile and they're not very receptive to new ideas. You might think that that's strange, but here's how it works. People at the top of the organization may tout their commitment to innovation and their interest in doing things in new ways, but the people whose responsibility is actually to conduct the studies, you know, they realize if we try something new and it doesn't work, if it fails, then I'm going to be in a very bad position. You know, people are going to ask me, why in the heck did I try something new? And if I do it the old way, well, that's what everyone expects to be done. And so it becomes hard to innovate. When the pandemic hit, it opened up an opportunity for new ways of doing things. People in that period of time started saying, well, you know, there actually is no established hierarchy about how these studies should be done in the time of a pandemic. And it opened up a possibility to test these new ideas. Next slide. So, in particular, there was an opportunity with long COVID for us to be able to try a new approach to registries and trials and communities. There turned out to be no, like I said, established group of investigators. So we focused for proof of concept in this area of long COVID, and we were also drawn to it because we found that many people were suffering and there weren't enough studies going on in this area. And this is about people with ongoing symptoms after COVID-19 infection for weeks or months, affects multiple organs and body systems, may affect their daily function. And we saw this as an opportunity both to make a contribution here. We'd been pulled in to help in the pandemic because so many of us did in many different ways. We did in the science side. And we began to make some relationships and we thought this is a place where we can try some of this new approach. Next slide. So one of the things that we did was we said, could we create a community of people? Could we treat people who might be in these studies, again, as partners and provide some education, some engagement, some involvement? And could we collect information so that we could both understand the population, but also help them participate in studies more rapidly, enroll more rapidly? And so we started developing this concept of a readiness registry, one where people who were facing similar challenges could come together, could learn, could get access to information, and could be primed in a sense to participate in trials. We could answer questions, have town halls. We did a whole bunch of things in this community. Next slide. And we formed actually out of this community something we called the Yale Listen Study, which was a learning community where we could be rapidly asking people questions, learning from them, posting results, giving it back to them, publishing. This, of course, was important in long COVID where there was very little known, but we were beginning to develop an approach that could be generalized to a wide range of other conditions. And this started with a cultural approach that we would listen to people. Even in the designs of the study, we would bring people in who were affected to try to help us understand how could we architect this? How could we develop it? How could we design it in a way that would best serve them in the same way when at the same time it was best serving the needs of the science. Next slide. And so we had lots of ways to try to use technology around electronic health records and biospecimen collection. Next slide. We had a platform that I had helped develop that leveraged the fact that in 21st Century Cures Act, which was passed at the end of the Obama administration, it said explicitly people had a right to their medical data. And what we did was create a platform where people could gain agency, access to their medical records, and then share them with the study, but that they were put in control of their own records. They could get them from the healthcare systems. It would be aggregated in the cloud-based account that they had control over. It wouldn't move without their permission. It would never be sold or otherwise used without their explicit permission, and put them in a position where they could share it into a study. And that could include information from a wide variety of healthcare systems or from pharmacies or from devices, all coming into them and then requiring their permission to be shared. Next slide. And we also said, sometimes it's hard for people to have to travel to get blood drawn or specimens collected. So, could you build this in so that if there were parts of the study that required biospecimen collection, someone could come to their home, someone could make it convenient for them. If you didn't want them to come to your home, could we arrange for it to be done at a Quest? What could we do to make it easy for people who are part of these studies? How could we make research fun, easy, engaging? How can we make people feel part of the mission? How could we truly be worthy of their participation? And how could we show them such great respect? And if we could, how could we pay them for their time? Not because they were doing it for pay, but out of respect for the fact that they were investing time. And we should be able to compensate in some way for that effort. Next slide. So, all of this is about the premise that we're in the moment of a life sciences revolution, of an engineering revolution, and of an AI data science revolution. All of this comes together to put us in a position in medicine to be able to make rapid breakthroughs. But you want to know what the choke point is? The choke point is developing the evidence that tells us whether or not this can be used in the clinic, whether or not this is good enough for FDA approval or authorization in ways that could then allow this to flow and actually help people. So we sort of have this amazing amount of science that's going on that's saying, here are things that could happen. Here are treatments that could flow forward, but it's all gets hung up in whether or not we can test them adequately and rapidly and come to some conclusion about their value in order to get them into places where they can actually help people. So this is all a premise about saying, what can we do to be about a transformative approach that enables us to generate the kind of knowledge that people need so they can make informed choices, so more options might be available to them. And this is this urgent need. Almost everyone will say, we've got this choke point. And this is all about overcoming that. So, in this case, and again, I consider this kind of an emblematic case. I sort of say this was trying to see whether a plane would fly at Kitty Hawk. We were doing the registry side, that is the observational study. But we wondered, could you actually use this approach to do what they call a phase 2 clinical trial? Something that would actually test a drug to determine whether it could be used, that could be used at the FDA to authorize it, approve it for use in the clinics. And so I got to be working with top immunobiologist, Akiko Iwasaki. Again, we were sort of brought together during the pandemic. We have skills in research. We were helping with the pandemic. It wasn't our natural place. We're cardiologists. We're interested in cardiovascular research, but we're sort of drawn in like everyone else to kind of help. But then there was this opening to say, could we transform research? Is this a place where innovation could grow? Would we be able to try this? And so we launched this PAX LC trial, seeing whether 2 weeks of Paxlovid, as you know, it's approved for 5 days for acute infection of COVID. But the question was for people with long COVID, there had been a hypothesis that persistence of the virus was the reason that some people continue to suffer. And the question was whether would 2 weeks of Paxlovid somehow help alleviate these symptoms. And so we were able to put together this design with a decentralized trial and give it a try. So this PAXLC trial was a decentralized phase 2 with pharmacologic intervention, active agent versus placebo across the United States with only a single IRB. So the idea was, could we break the sound barrier on how this stuff is done, enroll quickly, delight the participants, and actually produce something that no one had ever seen before with regard to this, that you could enroll from anywhere across the 48 states, and we could make it convenient for anyone. I know, Mitsu, do you want to take over now, or do you want me to keep going?
Whichever will work.
I want to give you a chance to present too, and of
All
course,
right,
you
thank
played
you.
such a key role in here. So
Yeah,
why
of
don't you present what the trial is? We'll let Ewan talk about Unravel, and then we'll circle back.
course, happy to. Thank you, Harlan, and thank you, Dr. Sengupta, for inviting us to speak at the Grand Rounds. So my name is Mitsu Sawano, and I was one of the study investigators for the PAX LC trial, and also the two other studies that we were talking about today. And so just going back to the hypothesis of the PAXLC study. So for long COVID, there are 4 major pathomechanisms that have been hypothesized over the years of research. And what we aim to tackle was the hypothesis around viral reservoir or viral persistence. And what we thought would work was to bring in an antiviral agent to tackle this viral reservoir and potentially eradicate that reservoir so that eventually that long COVID symptoms would also fade away. That was the proposed pathomechanism behind the PAXLC study. So as Harlan mentioned, PAXLC was centered around this framework. So the patient population that we were seeking for was adults above the age of 18 and all across the US, contiguous USA, with prior COVID-19 infection and long COVID symptoms that were lasting over 12 weeks. And the intervention that we used was Paxlovid and taken twice daily for 15 days. Now, remember, the usual regimen for Paxlovid is a 5-day regimen where you use it for acute COVID infection. But we extended the duration of the study drug up to 15 days, more than 3 times of what the standard dose is. And as comparator, we used placebo, but there was a little bit of a trick to this where we added ritonavir to mimic the metallic taste that were often reported with using Paxlovid, so that we were able to kind of blind people, and people were not able to tell right away whether or not they received a placebo. So that was one of the tricks that we introduced within this study as well. The primary outcome that we aim to seek was the change in PROMIS 29, which is a general health status score, which is commonly used in many of the medical health society. And we use the domain within that PROMIS 29, which is called a PROMIS 29 Physical Health Summary Score. And when we compare that score from baseline to day 28 and looked at the changes over time. As for safety outcomes, we looked at adverse events and tracked it from baseline to week 6. And yes, and we are fortunate to report that we have been able to publish the results from the PAXLC trial. And we just accepted in Lancet Infectious Disease. This is available to anyone for the next 40 days because it's been maybe a week or so from April 3rd. But please feel free to grab your free copy and scanning this QR code over here. I'm not going to go into the details of the long COVID study itself, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone on the study team, many of us from Yale, and as well as many participants who brought great insights to how we designed the study, as Harlan has mentioned, about patient centricity and being patient mindful. Just mentioning what we found from the primary endpoint of the PAXLC, unfortunately, we do not see significant difference between the two groups, meaning Paxlovid used in the context of 15-day regimen versus a placebo. We're not able to seek for a meaningful difference in terms of the primary endpoint of PROMIS 29 physical health summary score. So we didn't see any changes there in terms of the scores that we evaluated into the health summary. So in a nutshell, the interpretation of this trial itself in clinical context would be Paxlovid over a duration of 15 days did not significantly improve health outcomes in participants with long COVID compared with placebo. at day 28. Now, however, we do want to emphasize that the study showed the feasibility of this large-scale decentralized trial in the context of long COVID. And no one has done this before, and we're really happy to report that we were able to complete this study in this manner. You will be able to look at our methods paper or design paper, which has been previously published in the American Journals of Medicine. But we do have this schedule of activities laid out here, and all of this has taken place online. And with our study coordinators and our wonderful project managers, we were able to complete and participants and guide our participants to follow this protocol without very few with protocol deviations. So this is kind of the processes that we had for the PAXLC trial. And we went from e-recruitment to e-monitoring. So the ones that I mentioned with an E up front are the ones that necessitated digital or online activities, whereas there were some elements where we had to have some kind of in-person contact with the participants. And I'm going to talk about this, the process one by one. So in terms of recruitment, because this is not conducted in a traditional site, we needed to recruit participants online. And what we mean by that is that we had to we have to spread the word of our study, that such a study is ongoing, through websites, social media posts, podcasts, webinars. We had Yale University press releases. Yale's help us discover volunteer registries, and our Yale cultural ambassadors that helped us reach out to African American communities around New Haven. I might just bring up a little bit two examples as a screenshot here. One of the top is from a NIH Programmatic Trials Collaboratory podcast or YouTube that we did. This is also was a grand rounds back in 2023. And many of our study investigators also participated and also spoke during that session. Another screenshot on the right bottom is a tweet or a post on X from Dr. Akiko Iwasaki, who has built a huge community or huge number of followers in the long COVID community that helped us recruit many participants into this study. And as Harlan mentioned, we were able to recruit participants from 22 states all throughout the US, amongst the 48 contiguous states. So nearly reaching half of the 48 contiguous states. And in terms of demographic diversity, we compare this to what we saw from NIHS, which is a population-based study, which is conducted as a cross-sectional studies amongst US population. And because they had a unique question introduced back in 2022, where they were asking participants whether or not they had long COVID in the past, we were able to compare it to what we saw in the PAXLC study in terms of demographic features. And when we compare this with the NIHS demographic, we saw that our PAXLC study demographics were quite younger than the national average and predominantly female. But also, this is a key limitation of our study, and where we need to do more or better in terms of decentralized studies or trials is the lack of racial and ethnic diversity, where we saw a huge proportion of white Caucasian people enrolled in a PAXLC study as compared with the NIHS study. In terms of eligibility, we were able to determine eligibility through the Hugo Connect, where we were looking into people's EHR data through a format called a FHIR data. And then we were able to pull that in, create a readable PDF format, and we had a couple of study investigators taking a look at it in the traditional way in order to go down the criteria that we had in terms of inclusion and exclusion criteria. In terms of biospecimen collection, we already kind of touched on this, but we were able to collect clinical labs and biospecimens through the Exam1 and also Quest labs that are available all across the US. Now, Quest Diagnostics labs were responsible for taking the clinical labs for safety reasons during the study period where people were taking the investigational drug over the course of 15 days. We were initially requested to avoid this labs, but after further discussion, we were in a position where we necessitated this lab to be worked out at baseline as well as at day 15. So at these two time points, participants were going into Quest Diagnostic Centers, which were readily available within their living areas, maybe like 30-minute driving areas. And then for the clinical labs were taken at the Quest Diagnostic Centers, whereas the biospecimen collection for blood and saliva collection that were analyzed at Akiko Iwasaki labs for deep immunophenotyping, those were taken at Exam1. So Exam1 phlebotomists went to participants' homes and took those samples and shipped them over to Connecticut, where Akiko Iwasaki's labs is currently at. And we also collected a collection of a pharmacokinetic analysis, PKA analysis, where we wanted to confirm whether or not participants were actually taking Paxlovid. And this was done also successfully through the Exam1 service. In terms of drug shipment, so we collect participants' information, their names, addresses, and then through ULMAC, where they produced, where they packed the placebo as well as the active agent, Paxlovid, where people were blinded and were never able to tell which one is which. And then these drugs were shipped to participants' homes directly through the ULMAC shipment system. They also provided additional service where they were collecting the pills after the 15-day treatment was completed. And what we did was to collect them and count the actual pills that were taken by the participants. E-monitoring. So I talked about the pill count from ULMAC, but we also had different data sources. We were pulling data from the participant side, from the e-daily diaries, where we looked at adherence and adverse events that had taken place during the trial, during the 15-day regimen, as well as until week 6, up until week 6. The other data element was the electronic health record data that were used also to supplement the data monitoring process. And this was conducted until week 24 to look into adverse events that may have occurred along throughout the journey of the trial. And with that, I would like to shift gears to the UNRAVEL study, where my colleague Yuan will present this study.
Thanks so much, Mitchell. Hello, everyone. My name is Yuan Lu, and thank you for having us today. So now next, switch gears and talk about UNRAVEL. This is a decentralized study focused on understanding lipoprotein little a, or LP little a, in patients with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, or ASCVD. This is a topic that has been gaining momentum as we recognize that LP little a is not only just a heritable risk factor, but also one that we've been under-measured and under-addressed in real-world clinical practice. The UNRAVEL study aims to address that. Next slide. Our primary goal in UNRAVEL is simple: to determine LP little a level. You can click next. To determine the LP little a level in a diverse national sample of patients with established ASCVD, and especially to make sure we're including population who are underrepresented in traditional clinical trial or lipid research. Our secondary goals are broader. We want to understand not just what Lp(a) level people have, but why. That means looking at demographic, genomics, social, behavioral, and clinical characteristics that may be associated with Lp(a) level. And third, we are exploring knowledge, attitudes, and belief regarding cardiovascular risk, because if we want to intervene on Lp(a) in the future, we'll need to know what patient actually understands about cardiovascular risk. Next slide, please. This is a cross-sectional observational study of 1,000 patients with documented ASCVD. So compared to the PAX LC clinical trial, this is purely observational, no intervention at all. If you click next, we're trying to enroll 1,000 patients with ASCVD. Either they have myocardial infarction, ischemic stroke, peripheral artery disease, or having some procedure like CABG, PCI. And we are enrolling equal proportion of patients from 4 racial ethnicity subgroups, including non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic Black, Hispanic and Latino participant, and finally, South Asian patient. This is the one that we need your help most. Next slide, please. What makes this difference is that we are doing everything virtually. There's no physical site, just a decentralized digital registry with one central IRB, streamlined consent, and online screening in both English and Spanish. So click next. This is summarize the study design in a nutshell. So in terms of recruitment, we are leveraging community, social media, healthcare system, healthcare utilization organizations such as Rutgers. We're also collaborating with Rush in Chicago and Houston Methodist in Texas to identify patients with established ASCVD. In terms of screening, we will be using REDCap system designed by Yale so that the participant just need to take a couple minutes to fill out the pre-screening survey. And we will be also using Hugo Connect that Hanan already covered at the earlier of this presentation to connect patients' medical record. And the purpose for this medical record connection is just to confirm their eligibility. They do have ASCVD event. After that, our Yale study coordinator will take over and do the consent electronically through the REDCap system. In terms of data elements, it includes multiple domains of data source, such as the EHR data through Hugo that we already covered. And through the REDCap system, we will be also collecting self-reported questionnaire on demographic, family, social behavioral characteristic, and also about patients' knowledge, attitude, and belief regarding cardiovascular disease prevention. And to measure the Lp(a) level, participants just need to go to Quest Lab, whichever location close to their home, and just do one blood draw to collect the blood sample. And it will measure, besides Lp(a), that also include lipid profile, biometric measurements such as blood pressure, weight, waist circumference, and height. And finally, there's an optional component of it, which is we are collaborating with a company called Galatea Bio, will provide a free saliva sample, which will provide a free ancestry analysis and polygenic risk score. For the ancestry analysis, it would be interesting to let us compare what the patient self-reported as their race and ethnicity versus what actually the analysis, genetic analysis shows up. But this component is purely observational. Next slide, please. So in terms of outcome, we are capturing a few core metrics. In terms of Lp(a) distribution, we are looking at mean and median of Lp(a) and also the distribution, so we can see how wide the range is. And we will be also looking at the prevalence of elevated Lp(a) level using several cutoffs, including 50, 70, 90, 180 milligram per deciliter. This is the threshold has been used in clinical trials such as Horizon. This will help us understand what proportion of real-world ASD patient may qualify for therapy down the line. Next slide, please. And this is the Yale UNRAVEL study website, and we have a QR code here. If the participants scan the QR code, then we'll link them to the pre-screening survey. And on the website, there's also a blue button at the bottom to let participants to easily go into the pre-screening survey. Next slide, please. Pre-screening happen online in both English and Spanish. Patients just need to answer a very short set of questions, probably can be done in 1 or 2 minutes to confirm their eligibility, such as whether they have ASCVD, whether they are able to consent, whether they are willing to complete the study step like sample collection. And here is where we need your help. Next slide, please. So what we are asking from clinician, if you can next, is to identify patients who might be eligible, simply those patients with ASCVD, and share the study link with them. To facilitate that, we have created email template that can be easily tailored or sent to the patient. Once the patient complete the short survey, the Yale study coordinator will take it from there. No additional work for provider. And I want to mention that we particularly focus on increasing representation. So sharing with women, Black, Hispanic, and South Asian patients, and others who are often overlooked in cardiometabolic research is especially valuable. Next slide, please. So this is a sample message that I've been sending in the Yale system, and it has been very successful. It's simple, it's inviting, and emphasizing that the study participation is fully remote. So at Yale, I can share that we have been leveraging our friends, the physician network at Yale, to send out message to patients through my chart. So as of today, we have enrolled 163 participants from Yale and some of the other sites as well. But most of them are non-Hispanic white patients. For South Asian, there's only 1 or 2. Black and Hispanic patient, maybe 10 patients in total. So we definitely need your help to identify more patients from these other racial ethnic subgroups. Next slide, please. And of course, you can also help amplify by reposting on social media. We have been creating all these posts that are easy to share, and also the QR code. Just getting the word out there would be incredibly helpful for us to identify patients that we otherwise wouldn't find. So as we're working on the enrollment of UNRAVEL, we already think about how this platform can be served as a model for other decentralized study. So what is next? Now, next slide, I will turn it back to Holland to talk about the future study.
Yeah, and I think we can, I want to make sure that we leave enough time for questions. So, and we can talk about a whole range of things. Let me just say that the whole goal here is to say whether we can work together to try to really give people the opportunity to participate in studies that are designed for them, that are intended to, again, in the PAX LC, we asked this question at the end, you know, how likely would you be to enroll again? How likely would you be to, you know, recommend this to a family member? It's sort of, people call these things like net promoter scores. You know, it's almost like we want to be able to have people brag about their experience and to say they really felt that they were contributing something important and it was designed with them in mind. So all these studies are about trying to get to a point where we can do things faster, better, cycle through, produce that knowledge. I'll give you an example of what happened with PAX LC. When we were done with the study, we actually had a town hall before just as the paper was publishing, before other people really got the result, where we invited everyone who participated in the study to come together, and we presented the results, and we gave them the opportunity to ask questions. You know, we said that you're our community. I can't tell you how many studies I've been involved in where we didn't even tell the people who were in the studies what the result was. I'll never do that again. You know, that's not the way to treat people. That's not the way to do things. And we're trying to do things completely differently now. And in the next one that, you know, we're going to do, and I'll stop after this, but just to let you know, is we think now's a good time to put together a large scale study of people who are overweight or are living with obesity. And actually, we're calling this thing Most of Us, because, you know, most of us actually are in this category now in the United States. And we think, there's so many options coming up. There's so many things happening. People are really needing information. And we need to be learning about people's real world experience. These trials are producing some information, but people's actual experience is a little bit different. There are problems with accessing these new treatments. How do they feel when they use these new treatments? And also, there are going to be lots of new opportunities to participate in trials. And how are we making sure that people are prepared to do that? And again, we want to get away from the stigma of this. And that's why we were, thinking most of us is a way to call it, because it's like, how can we pull together people? And as Partho knows, this is all about cardiometabolic risk. It's not about actually how you look. It's more about your cardiovascular health. And we want to be able to be in a position where we can bring people together, think about what the options are, provide education and entry into helping people to contribute to the new knowledge that will help propel us toward the future. So this is all the spirit of what we're doing. Let me just stop now, because you all know, you can tell by now, I can keep talking forever, and take on questions and see what others have to say. And I want to thank you all. Gosh, 108 people, participants. That's amazing. What a great place you've got, Partho. And it's really just our distinct pleasure to be part of this event, and we're so honored to have been invited.
Yeah, Harlan. So thank you very much, Mitsu and Jan, for that great talk. So I think let me just summarize and then open up the panel. So we are in this program, this study. We have signed an agreement with Rutgers. We have got a green. So there is already a Yale and Rutgers collaboration agreement, which allows us to collaborate freely. But more importantly, I think the goal here is to be the beacon for all these clinical studies to be brought to the community, and particularly looking into the South Asian community, where I think 250 participants, and I think we want to make sure that we get to the numbers. So a couple of questions that will come up. I think, Harlan, it's a complex organization. As we know that we are a university and a health system, and within the health system, we have many groups who have come together. There are lots of different layers of dynamics. And one of the most critical question that comes is that patients come to each of the groups and a provider. And the ask is the provider or the champions are going to find which of the patients are suitable for the trial and give them a direction to be able to go out and participate in the trial. Now, what I'm going to probably, this is the biggest question. What does it mean to a provider? Number one, they're putting their name at risk, right? And their relationship with the patient at risk. Are there any risks to those relationships? How do we mitigate if there are any questions that emerge in terms of patient expectations with participation in the trial? What has been your experience in the decentralized previous trial? So I'm just going to start and then maybe have each one of the panelists raise a question if possible. So who wants to, it's Harlan to you or Mitsu or?
Let me give Mitsu and you a chance.
What is at risk here?
Go ahead, say it again, Partho, and I'll let them, and then I can chime in.
Okay. Mitsu, you want to take that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I mean, personally, I don't see any risk associated with participating or actually spreading the word of this study. The biggest, probably the strength of this study would be, and what we can provide in feedback, or as a sign of appreciation, would be the actual blood draw results. So for this, if you are able to introduce this study to your patient, and then if the patient allows and agrees to the terms, then we can possibly share it back to the provider with the advanced lipid testing that includes Lp(a), ApoB, and other chemistry, and also and also high sensitivity CRPs. And I'm happy to share the list of the blood draws that we're gonna conduct within the study. I think that's the easiest, kind of like a show of appreciation that we can provide. And additionally, I think we can also consider more things down the road. I mean, if if people are interested in proposing a study paper or like writing a paper from this, we were happy to discuss potential studies that we can analyze the data from on. So these are probably the opportunities that we may be able to seek further collaborations on.
Great.
And
So
go ahead.
sorry, yeah, Harlan, you were going, yeah.
No, I just want to, reinforce that. I think that there's tremendous value for people. Look, this is a very simple and easy study. It's just sort of cross-sectional study in the sense of, it's providing about over $400 worth of cardiovascular testing that people are going to be able to get back from Quest that, represents the sort of latest of what people might do for understanding what their risk is. Then we really aren't asking anything more of them. They don't have to, answer more questions, but they are now sort of part of our group. There may be more opportunities that we can offer in the end. Novartis, which has funded this, actually we have a great deal with them. They just wanted summary data. They want to know like how many people have elevated Lp(a) out in the community. And so we're going to provide them tables. We're not even providing them the entire data set. It's just summary tables. And they said, we can leave with you the data. And if you've got other studies or you want to be able to do things on top, it's totally up to you. And so, they just wanted to have a sense of in the community, what are the percentages of people who have elevated Lp(a). And so this meant it was very low burden on the funder side. So it gives us great latitude. And for us, it was really a chance to try out this design to see how it would work. How could we find partners who want to work with us? But we're very eager. People want to write on the study or take advantage of it. We're going to have, it'll be a rich amount of data on 1,000 people. I think with regard to the participants, what we want to do is when we're done, have a town hall, be able to answer questions, tell them what we learned, congratulate them for being part of it, and show great gratitude and appreciation for that participation. So, we want to do that. Someone's just asking about bias. I must admit, it wasn't the study I would design if I wanted to know what the population prevalence of Lp(a) was. But we turned out that that's what, they were willing to pay for us to collect data that we would use for other purposes. For example, I want to see whether or not this is a protocolized data collection. This is what my main thing was. This is protocolized data collection that will allow us to ascertain risks for individuals. Plus, we're going to have access with their permission to the medical records. My question was, could you develop a digital native risk stratification approach in the medical record that could approximate what you would get with a protocolized data collection? In this case, we're going to have 1,000 people with protocolized data collection, their height, weight, blood pressure measured, and all of these lab tests. And we've got their medical record. If I wanted to predict what their score was based on medical records, and the medical records missing a lot of information. People have different amounts of information in different time scale. But could I put together an algorithm that could essentially predict what the risk was from the protocolized data collection? That would be pretty cool. Right now, what most people are trying to do when they get medical records and doing risk scores is crosswalking. Okay, like I've got the Framingham risk score. Can I find a cholesterol in the medical record? I've got the blood pressure. Can I find a blood pressure? And they try to do the same score using the same approach. I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think you ought to see whether or not we can use AI, all our data science, with all the data that's in the medical record, and see if I can predict the score from a protocolized data collection. And then how do I do that? If that works, that turns out to be, that's how we probably should be doing it, rather than trying to crosswalk information. And that way I can give patients better information about their risk from their medical records without having to measure one more thing, because I've worked out a way to do it. These are the kind of things I'm thinking about, which is what can we do with this database that would be useful? But that estimating the population prevalence, I agree with you. It's going to be biased because of what we've got, but that's fine. They want to see what that is, they can. But I don't think that's the way to get the population prevalence. It's a different question.
So Rachna, as the leader for preventive cardiology programs, I think this will be a great connection, directly working very closely with an esteemed group at Yale. And of course, I can see many other projects that will probably come through the pipeline. What do you foresee are challenges, or you have any response to this suggested study?
First and foremost, thank you for having me. Also, Harlan and your entire team, I really congratulate you for presenting this amazing and decentralized module. Because a lot of times patients want to go, but then there are barriers to entry, and as you have correctly identified, having their blood drawn and the medications and all. So this is amazing. I see this as a great conduit to partnerships and population-based studies. So really, really thankful for that. One question I have is that does patients' insurance matter? No, right?
No,
Not,
yeah.
not for this. They don't have to, yeah, there's no
Mhm.
charge to them. They get everything and actually, we think this is actually better for people who might have trouble
Correct.
with insurance because it could provide a very comprehensive cardiovascular risk panel for no cost at all.
And that's the reason I asked, because we do a lot of health screening, especially in underserved or populations or health camps. And this can be easily offered to them in the South Asian community. I'll be very happy to. If at the end, if we can get the QR code and information again, maybe Navina or Partha, if we can share it,
Absolutely.
I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
That'd
Absolutely.
be wonderful.
Awesome. Ranjita, so I know that you practice both a combination of preventive and also invasive cardiology. You have also many of these patients who are post-procedural and secondary risk and with ASCVD risk. How do you feel about any questions from your side?
Great. I would like to, first of all, thank you, Partho, Harlan, and the team. Great presentation. And you chose a topic that's very close to my heart. LP little a, I screen all my Southeast Asian population and patients with very high family history of premature cardiovascular disease. I screen them all. And often, chiming in with Rachna, is the insurance doesn't pay. So, and nowadays, I have a very young population, and they are very interested in preventive cardiology, and they are very interested in finding out what are the risks going ahead, going forward, chance of a recurrent MI or chance of a stroke, and they are willing to participate in studies. They are willing to go ahead with testing or whatever is needed, but sometimes insurance is a hurdle. So it's great that if we can enroll these patients in your study, and if they're covering the cost for this lipoprotein A, ApoB, or any other inflammatory markers, which we know is a keyword in this day and age, that would be great. The question I have is, in terms of enrolling patients, you mentioned that there is a survey to see whether they fit in the criteria or not. Most of our patients are pretty savvy and they should be able to scan the QR code and do it themselves. But talking about a little bit on the, elderly side, maybe in the 60s, they may not be that computer savvy as to go in and do it. I myself am involved in currently 2 IRB protocols, and I kind of help them out a little bit in my office practice where they're having difficulty in this enrolling thing. So do you have anything where you can help the patients or guide the patients to go through the survey? Because I think that would help a lot in enrolling more and more patients. Because sometimes when they just leave the office or leave the doctor's room, they're like, okay, it's too much work, who has time to go through this 10 questions? But if they are in the doctor's room and the doctor can kind of, maybe it's 5 questions, like how long will it take? 5 seconds, another 5 seconds of your visit. So I think that would be a better approach to keep. Keep the option of online survey, but maybe another approach where you can kind of encourage the doctors also to help enroll them right then and there when they are seeing the patients. That's my suggestion, but I'm kind of just thinking out of the box.
Yes, I think that's very helpful. And we also encountered the same situation here at Yale, where some of the patients were very elderly, in their 80s, in their 70s. Sometimes we just text message to their phone with the link, and then they open the link. What they need to enter, just their first, last name, their phone number, or email address. Then after that, the study coordinator will have the right to recontact them and just walk them through the rest of the survey. They can just talk on the phone, and the study coordinator can help them enter the answer into the portal. So they don't even need to open the computer or anything like that.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important is that this decentralized approach doesn't mean it's not high touch. You know, we can still do high touch. In fact, we have more resources to do high touch. We're just doing high touch remotely, phone. You know, in our trial, you know, people actually felt, I think, they made strong relations with study coordinators. Yashir Hendriquez is with us now, and she did such a great job on this. And you know, there's something also about people going to the site where they feel the hierarchy, you know, or it's sort of, they feel, you know, like I feel like I'm small and that this place is big. But when we're doing it decentralized, it can more be an equalizer. It's like in their home where they're feeling more comfortable and they're able to participate. I will just say one thing that I don't want to lose. This particular study does require that people have ASCVDs. So they have to have established heart disease. I think if we do this successfully, it's also going to open up the window for us to propose other studies, which, by the way, you guys may want to lead at some point. Like we have this design, we've shown we can do this. Then, you know, like there's maybe ideas you guys want to do. So, you know, I think once we show that others, sponsors, we can do this highly efficiently, people are going to come back, you know, and want to do other things with us. Again, what we want to do is say, we can do this with you, but the data we need to be able to use it academically and scholarly, and it has to maintain integrity. And we're not, you know, a CRO doing something that just on contract for a company. This has to have academic value and for us and for society, or else it's not something that we're interested in doing. And that's another principle.
Harlan, that's a very important point, and I'm just going to turn to Kusum. So we have a lot of young South Asian population who have already established coronary artery disease, or at least they may not be knowing. We are in the process. We end up diagnosing them. They just get an MI and so on and so forth. Kusum, I wanted to talk to you about your interest in temples and about our patients who are without insurances and all the health camps that you've been doing all the time. Could you talk about the pertinence of this study in that environment?
Yeah, sure. Thank you all for having me here. So Dr. Harlan, like you did the long-term COVID study, I kind of became the face of the South Asian doctor community during COVID, because as an emergency doctor here in Robert Wood Johnson in New Brunswick and a frontline responder, I saw a lot that was happening with COVID, you know, the day-to-day symptoms, the management, the on and off theories with masking, not masking. So a lot of TV shows, radio shows, you name it, New Jersey Tell, you know, TV Asia, all kinds of radio facilities, billboards, everybody, Facebook, everybody reached out to me to kind of speak to the community. And I speak about 4 different Indian languages. I got very involved in talking to the community about the importance of vaccination, what to expect from COVID, et cetera, et cetera. So because I started doing that, I got a very good feel of the literacy, health literacy of our community. Their fears about different diseases, their concerns about different, you know, treatments and management. And that's how I got involved in our local sort of places of worship, where I go often. I talk about different diseases. I talk about simple things like burn management to ACLS. And I get a lot of feedback from the patients. Where do I go next from the patient population? How do I manage these diseases, et cetera? And of course, I direct everyone to Rutgers, to Robert Wood Johnson, to come for the different treatments and for the different care. So that is my interest. When I heard what y'all are doing now with this study, it is fantastic. I think we need it. And I think there's a lot of reception from the community. People would love to do this. If one of us gets up there, talks a little bit about the importance, the moral value, like you said, the academic value of doing the study and how it's going to help the patients, it will be awesome. But also the next steps, right? So once we get the data, can they follow up with their cardiologist? Kind of streamlining that will also be very important. Like I was able to help them, you know, during COVID, I could tell them, these are the places to go to get your COVID vaccine. That was very helpful to the patients. So same way, right? That once you do your blood test, and let's say the results do come back concerning, these are the different cardiologists you can go see to get your, you know, your future care.
And Kusum, that's what we are trying to solve here. We have 2 cardiologists and 1 strong community. And I think we can form the triangle of success. Yes. And many are, you know, you can do a quadrangle or maybe a pentagon, whatever you needed of success. And then, of course, Yale's team. But I also feel, Kusum, is that it just opens our eyes to be able to dream what Harlan and his team are trying to do and just be able to come onto the national stage. Think about, I think we should advocate for being in ACC and participate and making it a bigger forum and through the success of these kind of trial. And that brings us into the national scene. I mean, that's also one of my interests, to bring people like you who have a different angle of contribution to the clinical studies and academics, right? Be also highlighted on a bigger stage. And certainly Harlan can help us through that process.
My pleasure. And, you know, the more we work together, the idea is getting people visibility, opportunity to have impact. Look, the whole bottom line here is how can we put everyone in a position to have the greatest impact that they can, make the most contribution that they can. And I think the more that we can do these sort of transformative things together, we can create these opportunities. That'd be wonderful. That would be a wonderful outcome.
Rachna, you had a point.
Yeah, I just really wanted to applaud you for breaking the barriers, because when you're in practice, when you're in the community, you want to participate, but there are so many barriers for you to get your patients the benefit. And patients trust you because we have long-term, years and years of longitudinal relationship with them. So if we can get concise information, that gets to us, because if we say enroll and consider this, it happens. And then I like Ranjita's point of keeping the best retention potential is when they enroll while they're in the office. So if you can help us streamline and facilitate that process, I think that will be a hallmark for success.
And Harlan, as I think somehow the clinical trials have become captive to a group of investigators who are always highlighted as primary investigators. And I think what we are missing out here is an ability to engage also our community leaders and them be part of NEGM, JAC contributions. And I think that's the success story of all of this, because I think the more we are able to enroll and get the story out, the quicker are the trials and quicker is the clinical evidence that is emerging, better is the outcome of.
Nothing would make me happier than to bring new faces to this stage and to be able to show that we can do things that other people can't do, and that we can do it with respect, honor. You know, we can make sure that people feel that we really truly value them. We do. And we do it a different way, right? We do it this way. And then people will march to our door. You know, they want to do things with us, and it'll change this whole, you're right. Like there is this kind of legacy kind of group of people who repetitively you see. And I think we can bring new faces to that. I think we can do it in new ways. And I think we can do it with a different style that really does honor and respect those involved. That's my dream part though. And like, that's why working with you in this team, I can already now see this team. I'm so excited now because you guys are so amazing. And there's lots of possibilities here, I think, that we should really try to leverage. And I'm telling you, this next thing, that most of us idea, that idea of bringing people in around that with cardiometabolic and trying to figure out health and reduce risk together, this would be another big opportunity for us to do things that other people can't do.
Fantastic. I think we are already 12 minutes over the time. Thank you, everyone. We